I found my name where it could not exist. Not on paper. Not on an ID. Not as a signature under someone else's contract. I saw it carved into a living tree, cut deep, like the blade had gone past bark and into skin. The letters were steady and neat, done with cold confidence. Ethan Blackwood. My name. The one I leave nowhere unless I must. Sitting on the trunk of an old spruce, hours from the nearest town. In a place with barely any trails. Only brush, moss, and the smell of wet roots. I tried to give it a simple explanation. Someone followed me. Someone was playing a joke. Someone wanted me scared. The mind always reaches for simple first. For the logical. For what the hands can grab. It is easier to breathe that way. It is easier not to notice that darkness sometimes takes steps, and sometimes only waits until you walk to it. I stood in that forest, while my flashlight cut the air into a narrow blade of light. The beam slid over bark, caught on sap, on cracks, on lichen, then returned again to my name, as if it did not believe it any more than I did. Cold found a way under my jacket, even though it was thick and practical, built to vanish into shadow. I'd worn it through rain and sleepless hikes and wind that felt like glass. It smelled of smoke and old sweat, like anything that has survived too many nights. I touched the carved letters with my fingers. In the grooves, there was dampness still, as if whoever cut them had done it recently. Sap shone like a tire. I pulled my hand back and looked at my fingertips. A dark smear clung to my skin like dirt. I wiped it on my pants, and it did not vanish at once, like it wanted to remind me I had touched something I should not touch. Then something breathed from the dark. Not wind, not a branch. A human exhale, only too long, too patient. I froze, and in that second I felt what I have felt so many times, in places where fear does not scream. It stands beside you, and listens while you pretend it is not there. My body was never meant for comfort. It was meant to endure. I knew how long I could walk without sleep, how to swallow cold air without tearing my lungs, how to keep panic off my face, even while it clawed at my ribs. I knew what fear looks like. I have met its eyes. I survived, and you always pay for that. Not at once, not with money. You pay with the attention darkness starts giving you. That evening, I was not supposed to be in that forest. I should have been home, in my apartment where the windows faced a loud street, and the lamps made night look like a dirty day. I should have been warming my hands on coffee and telling myself the stories I do not say aloud were behind me. But I was there, and my name was on the tree. A postcard brought me. A plain piece of cardboard, edges worn, no stamp, no postmark, as if it had been carried by hand and slipped under my door. On the front was a photograph of an old fire lookout tower against a dark sky. The tower stood among trees like a skeleton gnawed by time. On the back was a message, short, clean. Ethan, you once did not make it in time. Now you have a chance. Come to where the forest remembers. Below it was a simple mark, like an eye crossed through or a knot, and a place name I did not know. Gray Hollow. I knew at once what it was aimed at. My guilt. My life had been built around that feeling for years. Guilt sits in your pocket like a stone. You learn the weight, but it never leaves. It only makes your steps heavier. Years ago, before I learned how to go quiet enough that people around me fall silent without meaning to, I worked search and rescue. Forest searches, missing hikers, kids who went out for mushrooms and never came back. Drunks who wanted to prove the night could not touch them. I saw a lot, but what stays is not blood and not death. What stays is the quiet after you return without the person you were supposed to bring home. A boy went missing. Small, wide eyes, wearing a jacket too big because his mother bought it to last. He left with a dog. The dog came back alone. Muddy paws, a look you could not hold. We searched for days. I found the tracks first. Little prints in wet earth, leading to an old cut in the ground where ferns grew thick. I went in ahead, because I always did. Because I thought speed mattered more than caution. I heard a sound, like soft crying. I followed it and stopped a few steps from where the ground gave way under my boot. It was not a deep fall, but it was the wrong kind. My ankle twisted hard. Pain shot up my leg. I shouted into my radio. The signal was weak. I had to drag myself out. Time spilled away. When we reached the place the crying had come from, it was empty. Just a scrap of cloth caught on a branch, and tracks that ended like the child had stopped being heavy enough for the earth. We never found him. His mother stood by the road when we came back and stared at us, like we carried a verdict we were afraid to say. I could not raise my eyes. I could not give her words that were not lies. After that, I quit. Not because I could not face the forest. Because the forest started looking back. It sounds foolish. But walk into darkness long enough, and you begin to feel it has habits. It remembers your steps, your breath, your doubt. I became what people become with that kind of weight, a quiet observer. I took private jobs, missing persons, cases families could not wait to push through official channels. Sometimes they hired me because I asked fewer questions. Sometimes because I knew how to come back alive. Sometimes because people sensed I was still searching too. Not just for others, for myself. Gray Hollow hooked me where it still hurt. I held the postcard a long time, like it could burn. That night, I woke sure someone was scratching under my door. I checked the lock. Nothing. But on the floor lay a thin strip of bark, black as charcoal. I had no houseplants. I had no reason to bring bark inside. I understood then that someone wanted me to go, and refusing would not be as simple as saying no. I packed the way I always do. Backpack, flashlight, spare batteries, a knife, not for heroics, for the ordinary, first aid, warm layers, a map, even though maps sometimes lie. Everything on me had a purpose. I do not like extra. I like what works. The drive toward Gray Hollow was long and wrong. Highway, then smaller roads, then dirt where stones rattled my undercarriage. The trees thickened. Cell signal died. The radio caught only static that sometimes shaped itself into something like whispering, and I blamed fatigue, because fatigue is the first lie that keeps you sane. The first sign I was near was smell. Smoke. Old and stubborn, like a fire that went out long ago but refused to stop being remembered. It drifted between trunks, though I saw no flame and no people. Smoke in the woods always means someone. Here it meant the forest itself still held fire in its lungs. Then came the empty houses, scattered like lost teeth. Windows dark, boarded or hollow like sockets. In yards lay things that used to matter, and now were only leftovers. A child's bicycle without wheels, a shattered bowl, a rusted doorbell no one would answer. I did not see anyone for a long time. When I finally did, it did not feel like relief. It felt like meeting someone in a dream where you are not sure they are alive. Gray Hollow had a store that was also the post office, and the bar, and the place where people stand and do not speak. The sign hung crooked. The door complained when I opened it. Inside smelled of coffee, cheap alcohol, and something else I recognized only after a second. damp wood, a basement smell. Behind the counter stood a man with shovel hands and eyes that looked past me like I had already been there and already left. A few locals sat at a table. They did not talk. They watched. I said I was looking over the fire lookout. I showed the postcard without handing it over at first. The man did not take it. He only leaned in and stared as if it were a dead bird. He told me no one goes there anymore. Said the path is swallowed. Said the forest in that direction does not like people. His voice was calm, but it carried the sense that he was speaking not to me, but to something behind my shoulder. I asked about the mark on the card, the knot, the crossed eye. His gaze shifted away. Someone at the table coughed like a warning. An old woman with thin fingers and hair, pulled so tight it seemed to keep her skull in place, lifted her eyes. She said it was the listener's mark. That was her word, listener. She said the forest always listens, but sometimes it wants someone to listen back. Sometimes it searches for ears that have learned not to scream. My shoulders tightened. I asked what she meant. She did not answer straight. She said if I came because of guilt, the forest would know what to show me. She said the tower was not just a tower. It was where people once watched for fire, and now they watch for what comes when there is no fire. The man finally pinched the postcard between two fingers, like it might stain him. He turned it, saw my name, and flinched so small I almost missed it. He handed it back and said, I had a choice. Leave now, or leave my car there and go on foot, because the road ahead would turn bad. Then, like it was nothing, he added that if I heard my name in the woods, I should not answer. Because if I did, the forest would know it guessed right. I did not ask how a forest guesses. Some questions only open doors. I left with the feeling that the air behind me had grown heavier. The locals watched like they were not watching me, with the shape of what was coming. I parked where they told me, tightened my pack straps, felt the familiar weight settle, the kind that steadies you. A pack does not whisper, it does not stare. The trail began almost invisible between two trees where moss was pressed flat, like many feet had passed, and then stopped. The woods swallowed me at once. Trunks close, branches braided, light lost. Even in day, it was dimmer than it should have been. I heard my steps, my breath, and something that did not match my rhythm. When I stopped, it stopped too. Time in the woods always smears. You think an hour passes and it is half a day, or the opposite. My compass needle twitched as if nervous. Stones wore thick moss like old heads sunk into earth. Roots surfaced like veins. Sometimes I felt the forest here was not growing. It was lying down, a vast creature breathing slow, disliking being walked on. Toward evening, I saw a rusted metal sign nailed to a tree, a little tower icon, an arrow pointing deeper. Under it, someone had carved the same knot mark from the postcard, and under that, my name again. This time, the letters were crooked, cut by a trembling hand, like whoever did it was afraid of being heard. I did not touch it. I just kept going, tension rising inside me, like a storm that does not make sound. When night came, I found a clearing, a stone ring for a fire. Someone had camped there before. I did not like that it looked recent. If no one goes that way, why did a fire ring look used? I set a small camp, quiet, efficient. I lit a low fire. Smoke rose and blended with the old smoke I'd been smelling since the drive, as if the forest was full of invisible fires. I ate, drank, and listened. The woods have a normal voice. Owls, small animals, the snap of a twig. That night, there was too much quiet. Like a room after a radio shuts off and you still expect a voice. I watched the flame. In its light, the trees beyond the circle stood like dark walls. I felt something out there. Not a deer. A deer does not stand and wait that long, unless it is starving. This waiting was different. Patient. Like that long exhale by the tree. I thought of the boy I failed. Night brings him back. Day is busy enough to keep the mind occupied. Night finds the cracks. I closed my eyes for a moment and heard my name. Far at first, like through the earth. A voice close to my own, but a little higher, like a recording. It spoke my name, the way people do when they know you will turn. I opened my eyes and stared into the dark. Nothing. Only trunks, only shadow. Only what is always there if you look long enough. I remembered the warning. If you hear your name, do not answer. If you answer, the forest knows it guessed right. I did not answer. I held still and even slowed my breathing. There is a skill in becoming part of quiet. You learn it by spending too many nights in places that want a reaction. The voice came again, closer. It spoke my name and then a sound that was not a word, a shape of sound, like wood making noise when it grows. Then I heard footsteps, slow, careful, on moss and leaf litter, but without the cracking you expect. Whoever walked knew where to place weight. That was not an animal. Animals do not practice silence for you. I took my flashlight and raised it slowly. I did not want to announce myself, but I understood that if something was there, it already knew. I swept the beam. Trees, brush, black gaps between trunks. Nothing. Then the light caught a white square on the ground. Paper. I stood and moved toward it, with the flashlight and my knife. Though a knife has never been the right answer to what the dark can be. The paper lay like it had been placed. I picked it up. A torn sheet from a notebook. My name written on it. And under my name, one sentence in someone else's hand, shaped like it was my own thought. You already answered back when you fell. My chest tightened. I knew what it meant. The ravine. The twisted ankle. The moment I shouted into the radio. I had answered fear then. I had spoken into the dark. I had admitted it. If the forest had me on a hook now, that hook was lodged in my throat. I returned to the fire, but it no longer warmed. It was a tiny candle in a large room. I sat with the paper until moisture from the air softened it and made it curl. I did not know if this was someone's game or something else. I only knew I was not alone. The night was bad. I slept in torn pieces. Each time I drifted off, I heard my own voice again. Sometimes like I was talking, sometimes like I was crying. I do not cry out loud, but dreams do not ask permission. At dawn, I buried the ash, erased what I could and moved on. I do not leave traces. But this time, I felt the trace was not just my boots. It was my presence, my attention, my fear. The forest changed. Taller trunks, thicker. Moss deeper like carpet. Air cooler though the sun climbed. I smelled water and rot. Somewhere nearby, there was a stream or a bog. Then I saw it. The fire lookout tower. It stood on a rise, lifting over the canopy like bones that stayed upright only because they forgot how to fall. The metal stairs were eaten with rust. Wooden platforms sagged. The windows of the top cabin were black, except one that caught light like something moved behind it. I stared up and felt something hard to name. Like I had come not to a place, but to a gaze. Like the tower was an eye looking down, and it had finally found me. I climbed carefully. Metal groaned under my boots. Each step sent vibration into my legs. Wind up there was colder. It carried forest smell and another scent. Old paper. Dust. The smell of a room no one has entered in years, except something is still awake inside it. The cabin door was cracked open. If no one went here, it should have been shut or torn away. It was open like someone stepped out for a moment and would be back. I pushed it. It swung without resistance. Inside was dim. Light leaked through dirty panes. I saw a table, scratched and old, a thick logbook on it, a radio set with big knobs, a yellowed map pinned to the wall with red pencil marks. And then I saw what dried my mouth. A child sat on the floor by the wall. Not the way children sit. It was still, back to me, knees hugged, a jacket too big. The image hit my ribs like a fist. That jacket. Oversized. Bought to grow into. I stepped forward. The floor creaked. The child did not move. I spoke softly. Careful. Not using a name because I did not know it. I said I would help. I said it though I did not know if it could be true. The child turned its head slowly. It was not the missing boy's face. It was mine. Younger, thinner, but mine. The same deep, dark eyes, only without fatigue. Empty as a mirror in a dark room. The mouth slightly open, like it was about to speak in my voice. My body backed away on instinct, heart hammering, but I kept my hand steady. Control does not remove fear. It only keeps fear from steering your fingers. The child stood. It moved like it had no weight. It stepped toward me and I smelled it. Not a child's smell. Wet wood, earth, basement air. The scent of something that lay in darkness a long time and learned to listen to the living above it. It spoke my name, in my voice. Quiet, almost gentle, the way a mother calls a child at night. I did not answer. I raised my light into its face. The beam sharpened its features. Then I saw the detail I missed at first. On its forehead was the line I carry, but it was not a wrinkle. It was a cut, shaped like the listener's knot. Cold ran through me, not from weather, but recognition. I'd not been called here as a rescuer. I'd been called as someone who already gave something to the dark once, and now the dark had come for the rest. The child reached out. In its fingers was an old iron key, rusted. A rough wooden tag hung from it, carved with my name and the listener's mark. I did not want to take it. My hand still moved, because in moments like that, you do not run on logic. You run on the belief that a key can open a door back to a life, where you can still fix something. The instant my fingers closed around the key, the tower shuddered. Not wind. A tremor through metal and wood, like a huge thing shifting in sleep. Voices flooded the cabin. From the radio, though, it was off. From the logbook, as if pages whispered. From the forest below. Each voice was familiar. People I searched for. People I did not find. People I left in the dark. And among them was the one voice that hurt worst. The missing boy's mother. Speaking my name. Not accusing. Not shouting. Only asking. Like she was still standing by the road. I ended up at the table without remembering the steps. I opened the logbook. It began with weather notes, wind, smoke. Then the entries changed. Not weather anymore. Sounds. The forest calling. The tower turning into a place you can listen to what should not have a voice. The handwriting changed across pages, like everyone who came here left a piece. Then I reached the last pages and my stomach turned. They were in my handwriting. It was impossible, but I knew my own letters, my own slants. The pages described me. The fire in the clearing, the notebook paper. Me standing here reading. The last line was short, written as if the hand shook. Take the key and open it if you want, back what you left in the ravine. But remember, the forest does not give without replacement. Behind me, the child laughed. Not a child laugh. My laugh. The one I use when I want to pretend I am not afraid. A laugh that is a lie. It said the ravine was never just a ravine. It was an entrance. It said I did not fall by accident. The dark simply helped me trip over my guilt. It said I already knew where the door was. Some calm came into me. Shock, maybe. Habit. That line inside me that says there is a boundary I will not cross. I told it if this was a game, it was a cruel one. I told it I would not give anyone else. I told it I came because someone called me and I wanted to know who. The child tilted its head like a bird. It said who did not matter. What mattered was the hollow left by disappearance. The fear that grows in unanswered places. Attention. Attention feeds. The radio hissed, and the static was that not word again. The sound of growing wood. The tower trembled. Windows quivered. Far below, birds exploded upward, their cries like laughter. I grabbed the key, not because I trusted it, but because I understood there was no leaving until I did what I was meant to do. The forest does not like refusal. It simply makes refusal impossible. I ran for the door. The child did not stop me. It only watched the way you watch a mouse run into a trap, believing it is a hole. The stairs down felt longer than they were. Metal groaned. Vibration climbed my bones. I hit the ground and ran into the trees. I did not look back. Looking back is how you get stuck. I ran toward the place my guilt remembered. It was not the same forest as years ago. Not the same map. Not the same life. But the sense of an entrance lived in my muscles. I knew the direction the way you know where a bruise sits without seeing it. The woods shifted around me. Trunks shorter but thicker. Moss wetter. Earth soft as clay. Water smell. Basement smell. Behind me something moved, not hurrying, because it knew I would come. I found the ravine by almost falling into it. Ferns hid it. The lip was slick. Below was not just shadow. It was dark in a way that swallowed light. I knelt and shone my beam down. The light went in and did not come back, like there was no bottom, only a mouth. The key warmed in my hand, not from my skin, from something waking inside it. The wooden tag felt damp, as if it had just been pulled from someone's mouth. I climbed down, slow, roots and stones, no wasted motion. If I fell, time would spill again, and I could not afford that kind of repeating. At the bottom, I stood in a narrow space where the walls were wet. Roots hung like hair. The air was heavy as a basement, and in the wall I saw a door, not wood, not metal, bark. The tree had grown itself into a door shape. The listener's mark was carved there, and beside it, at eye level, my name. I lifted the key. No keyhole showed, but my hand found the place anyway. The key slid into the bark like into flesh. Resistance, then a click. Not metal. Bone. The door opened on its own. It did not creak. It breathed. Cold air washed out, carrying scents. Dry leaves, old smoke, and the smell I recognized instantly. A child's jacket, wet from rain. I shone my light inside. This time the beam did not vanish. It hit something and returned. A corridor. Not dirt. Trunks interlaced like ribs. The floor was roots that flexed. Far ahead I heard a sound, thin and small. Crying. The same one. I stepped inside. The door behind me did not shut, but I felt it deciding when it would. The corridor ran long. My beam caught marks on the walls like someone counted steps, but the marks formed the listener's knot again and again. like a prayer cut into living wood. I walked, and the crying grew louder. Heat rose in my throat, not tears, anger, pain, guilt finally given a shape. Ahead was a round chamber, like the inside of a tree. In the center stood a table made from a stump. On it lay things: a child's glove, a scrap of cloth, a dog collar, a flashlight like the one I used years ago. Small objects people drop when they vanish. A collection. A memory piled like trophies. By the wall sat the boy. Not my face, not a trick. Him. I recognized him not by photographs, but by the way he held himself. Face hidden. Shaking. He looked older than he should, because time does not behave down there. In the dark, time stands still and listens. I fell to my knees beside him. I spoke his name. I did it even though I should not. The name rose into my mouth like a curse I had been carrying. I told him I was here. I told him I was real. I told him I was sorry. Words spilled out of me like stones, because sometimes the inside gets too loud to keep locked. He reached out slowly and touched my sleeve. His fingers were cold. He flinched, like he felt warmth for the first time in too long. Then he began to cry, for real, loud and breaking, the sound of a child finally seeing a way out. That is when I heard movement in the corridor. Slow, heavy. A large thing sliding between ribs of wood. I heard that long exhale again, deeper now, closer. The walls of the chamber felt like they tensed, like wood preparing to close. I lifted the boy into my arms. He was light as a branch. His heart hammered. I ran. The corridor back was different, narrower. Roots underfoot tried to throw me. My flashlight flickered as if light itself was tired. Behind us, the thing moved, not rushing, because the corridor belonged to it. At the doorway, the bark was already sliding shut, like eyelids. I rammed my shoulder. Pain. Again. The gap kept shrinking. The boy stirred against my chest and whispered into my ear. He said the door closes for a word, not for force. He said the forest listens. I stopped pushing. I held him tighter and whispered, "Not a name. Not a plea." I whispered refusal. I said I was not playing. I said I was not a listener. I said I did not belong there. The door shivered like it was offended, like it was thinking. It paused. I surged through the gap. Bark scraped my jacket. We spilled into the ravine. Above us, the world was gray like dirty paper. I dragged air into my lungs, real air, and hauled the boy up. Soil under my hands was cold and wet, but it was soil, not a corridor made of ribs. I ran until my legs burned, until the trees opened enough that I could breathe without feeling watched from every direction. Then I set the boy down and shone my light over him. He stood unsteady, like after deep sleep. I asked his name. He said it, the correct one. Something inside me cracked and grew lighter, like the stone in my pocket finally split. We started toward the trail. I held his hand. His palm was cold but alive. The forest around us stayed quiet, too quiet. I expected branches to tangle, voices to rise, something to demand what I had taken. Nothing happened. That was what scared me most. When darkness does not fight for what you stole, it means it received something else. In my hand, I felt weight. I looked down. The key was still there. I did not remember bringing it out, but it lay in my palm like it belonged. The wooden tag looked smoother now, polished by something. My name was carved there, and beside it, another name, his. We reached the clearing where I had camped, and the fire ring looked untouched, like no flame had ever lived there. My camp was gone, no pack, no trace. The night had been erased like the forest decided it did not need that part of the story. I swallowed and stared at the boy. He watched the trees as if listening to a conversation I could not hear. His lips moved slightly, like he was repeating something given to him. I told him to keep walking, to get back to town. He nodded without looking at me. It was not a child's nod. It was the nod of someone who has learned. There are things you do not ask. The walk back to Gray Hollow felt shorter, and I did not trust that. I kept waiting to see my name carved again, but there were no names anywhere. Like the forest went silent, because it had already spoken. When the settlement came into view, late light sinking, the same old smoke hung in the air. The store stood in its place. The locals were there. They came out when they saw us. They did not look at me. They looked at the boy. The old woman approached and studied his face. For a moment, her eyes softened. Then she looked at me with that patient gaze I'd felt in the trees. She said I had made a choice. She said the forest always offers a choice, but never tells you what you are choosing. She said the boy was not only a boy now, he was a listener too, because he heard what no one should hear and stayed alive. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say he was just a child, but when I opened my mouth, I felt a small whisper inside my chest, like a radio switched on, catching a station I did not tune. The man brought a blanket and wrapped the boy. The boy finally looked at me. His eyes were dark and attentive, not sleepy, not innocent, watchful the way only someone can be after seeing things better left unseen. I asked for a phone, for help, for police, for doctors, for anything that sounded like light. The man nodded, but said, "Sometimes you do not speak it out loud right away." He said, "If I tell the story in a voice big enough for the world, the forest will hear and ask for its payment faster." I nearly laughed at the absurdity. The laugh died before it reached my throat, because I already knew there was sense in it. Darkness always has its own sense. We stayed upstairs in a small room above the store, an old bed, springs that complained. I gave the boy water. He drank slowly like the taste was new. He lay down but did not sleep right away. He stared at the ceiling. I sat by the door in a chair, because that is what I do when someone beside me is fragile. I am not a hero. I just cannot afford to be late again. That night, I heard footsteps in the corridor below. Slow. Then they stopped under our window. I saw nothing, but I felt presence like pressure, like someone standing outside listening for our breath. I did not rise. I did not go to the glass. I sat and listened back, because sometimes in darkness the only thing you can do is refuse to become prey. Refuse to give it your movement, your scream, your word. I watched the boy. He slept, but his lips moved. He whispered in his dream. I leaned closer and my skin went cold. He was whispering my name, again and again, like he was calling, like he was answering something that called him first. I touched his shoulder gently. He did not wake. The whispering continued. In my pocket, the key felt warm, like a tiny heartbeat. I stepped into the darker part of the room and pulled the key out. The wooden tag showed my name and the boy's, but now a faint third line had appeared, the beginning of another name, like the forest was already carving space. In my head, I heard that sound again. Not a word. The sound from the radio in the tower. The walls seemed to tremble the smallest amount, like the tower had. I went back to the boy and watched him breathe. I told myself that in the morning I would drive him into real town, to real people, real lights, real paperwork. I told myself it would end, but stories like this do not end. They change shape. They move from place to place. They cling to people who answered once. Near dawn, I dozed in the chair. I dreamed of the ravine. I fell again. I shouted into the radio again, and this time my own voice answered me, soft and gentle, telling me I was doing everything right, telling me I was finally listening, telling me I would not be able to stop now. When I woke, it was still dark. The boy sat up on the bed watching me. His eyes were wide. He did not look like he had slept at all. He said the forest was under the window. He said he could hear it breathing. He said it wanted me to come back, because I did not only take a boy. I took a story the forest liked telling itself. I asked how he knew. He shrugged, the way children do when they cannot explain. But the motion carried something older. He said, if you sit in darkness long enough, you start hearing how it talks. First it is wind, then it is whisper, then it is your own voice. Something new tightened inside me. Not guilt. Responsibility that smelled like a trap. Because if the boy was a listener now, then I had not only saved him, I had brought darkness to him, or brought him to darkness in a way it would not release. I packed. We went downstairs. The locals were quiet. The old woman stood at the door and said this was only the beginning. She said there are other places where the forest listens, other towers, other ravines, other bark doors, and every door has its key. I did not ask how she knew. I saw in her eyes that she was a listener too. Maybe for a long time. Maybe so long she forgot who she was before. Outside, my car waited where I left it. A new postcard lay on the hood. I picked it up. On the front was a different tower, a different forest, a different sky, but the same darkness. On the back was my name, and one sentence. Now you know the way. Do not make us call twice. I lifted my head and stared at the trees beyond the houses. They stood still. No movement, no voices, but I felt something deep in them looking, not angry, not rushed, only attentive, like a predator that knows the prey has already been marked. I put the boy in the passenger seat. He sat without speaking, watching the window. I started the engine. As we rolled away, the radio I had not turned on spat a moment of static, and the static was my voice. Soft, almost gentle, saying my name. I did not answer, but in my pocket the key warmed like it was pleased, and while the road carried us out of Gray Hollow, I caught myself listening to the silence between the trees the way a person listens who no longer knows how to do anything else. The way a person listens who understands the dark does not always chase. Sometimes it only walks beside you, step for step, waiting for you to speak first.